Hello everybody, Zaya from 48 Detailing here again with the 1980 Corvette C3. Now if you haven't seen our video series already, we're doing as much of a restoration as we can on this vehicle to get it ready for car show season coming up very soon. So we went ahead and went over how to properly wash a classic vehicle. We went over how to do chip repair and polish out side pipe exhaust. Now today we're going to be going over how to polish out the paint, specifically going over paint correction, all right? So this is going to be a little bit more of a heavier entailed video. If you haven't done any kind of paint correction or polishing before, this is going to be a great start for you to learn the process and see if it's something that you want to tackle. Now, paint correction can mean a variety of things. For us, it is the polishing or compounding of a paint to bring it back to snuff, removing swirl marks, scratches, deeper marring, sanding marks, all that nasty stuff to bring back the original gloss and shine of the paint. In front of me, we have everything that we're pretty much going to need to go ahead and proceed with this paint correction, okay? So I'm going to bring you guys up close and personal, show you what we got going on over here, and then we'll start the process on the Corvette. Let's get to it. All right, guys, so this is pretty much all you're going to need to go ahead and perform a paint correction. Of course, you need to wash the car first, do a clay bar treatment, get it all prepped up and clean prior to utilizing any of the products and tools that we have here. But after you've done all that stuff, this is what you're going to need. So first things first, you're going to need some machines. What we have over here is a forced action polisher. This is similar to the Flex 3401. A DA polisher is good as well, such as Rupes, but this is my personal preference on heavy cut correction and polishing, all right? We also have a mini polisher over here, smaller backing plate to get around little areas of the vehicle. Then we have our pads. We have a heavy cut wool pad with an interface, and then we also have our blue medium to finishing polishing pad, all right? And that is why we call this a two-step. We're using two types of pads. We're going around the vehicle twice. And then, of course, you're going to need two types of polishes, primers, whatever you're going to be using at the time. Right over here, I have the NSPs from Dr. Beasley's, and then I also have a very heavy cut compound referred to as M100 from Meguiar's. So depending on how our first test spot performs on the Corvette will really dictate what route we need to take when it comes to our compound and polishes, all right? I don't want to get into too much technical and the differences between primers and compounds. I've done that in previous videos, so make sure to check those out if you want to learn more about the NSP line. And of course, we have our towels over here as well, and some smaller pads for our mini polisher over here too. All right, so we've already cleaned the car. We'll go ahead and start off with our heavy cut compound and go from there. So before we start, first thing we need to do is our test spot. Now the test spot is the area of the vehicle that you're going to test your compound polish and pad combinations, all right? You want to do this to save you time at the end of the day. If you just go all willy-nilly across the car and go back and forth with your compounds and polishes section by section, you're going to have a really patchy job throughout the vehicle, and you're going to have to work backwards in some areas as well. That's why we very much recommend pick an area of the car that's pretty much the worst compared to everything else. Perform your test spot from there. If your test spot achieves the results that you're looking for in the worst area, it's most likely going to be able to take care of everything else on the car as well, with some exceptions here and there. So if you don't have good lighting like us, you might want to use a spotlight. We're going to start off with the hood. We have a lot of swirl marks, we have a lot of marring, we have a lot of scratches and sanding marks. This is going to be a great area to test on because it's a nice flat surface, so we can keep our pressure even and consistent and get the results that we're looking for, and then use those same combinations of pad and polishes on the rest of the vehicle as well. So we're going to grab our polisher, all right? This has a 6-inch backing plate, so we're going to grab our 6-inch pad. Now, I've done this a lot. I've been doing paint correction for years. I've been working on thousands and thousands of vehicles during that time. When you start out, what you want to do is start light and then work heavy from there. So for example, if you have a vehicle, you don't just want to jump into the heaviest cut compound and polish that you have available. Yes, of course, it might remove it, but it might be overkill at the same time. Now, looking at this paint, seeing the amount of defects that we have going on and the experience that I have, I know we're gonna need a heavy cut pad and more of a heavy cut polish or compound as well. So I can skip that step, but for you as a beginner, you wanna start off light and then work your way up from there, all right? So start with a lighter cut pad, lighter cut polish. If that doesn't work, move up to medium and then move up to heavy. The reason why you do this is you don't wanna be overkill on the paint, all right? We're trying to correct and remove the damage from the vehicle surface with removing as little amount of clear as possible so we can preserve the paint's finish in the long haul. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use the wool pad, which is a heavier coarse cut pad, but I'm gonna combine it with our NSP 150. Now, when it comes to this lineup of products, the NSP 50 is the heaviest compound that they have available currently. But keep in mind, this compared to something like M100 from Meguiar's, this is rocks in a bottle compared to that stuff over there. So this right here is gonna be our heaviest combination with our wool pad, all right? This right here is more of a middle ground, so that's why I'm starting off with this comparatively to what we have on the surface that we need to work on, all right? All right, guys, so I got my polisher, I got my heavy cut pad, and I got my heavy cut compound. Now, from here on out, I'm not gonna refer to these things as NSPs or this and that. We're gonna do heavy compound, heavy polish, heavy pad. I wanna make this simple for you guys, all right? We're gonna go ahead and do our test spot. When you're doing your test spot, what I like to do is shoulder width, all right? So I use the width of my shoulders. Essentially, that's gonna be the section I'm gonna work on, left to right, and then up and down as well, all right? And we wanna keep that consistent throughout. So we're gonna go ahead and apply our heavy cut compound onto the surface that we're gonna work on. I'm gonna put a little bit more product because these pads do absorb a bit more than usual. And then I'm gonna start working it in. And as I start, I wanna keep in mind, I'm gonna be doing 6 pass-throughs. Consistent speed, medium pressure, all right? All right, guys, so went ahead and did my about 6 pass-throughs. You're essentially just gonna work it in until your compound and polish starts to become clear. That means you've worked in the abrasives, you've worked in the compound, and that's gonna give you the best overall results, okay? I'm gonna grab my spotlight. I'm gonna take a look at the paint, see what we got going on. And we are looking much better than we did prior. Compare it to my before, and I'll bring you guys in and kind of show you the results of our first test spot compared to where we were at before. So here is the before section. You can see all those swirls and scratches that we have going on all the way throughout the hood. And let me bring you guys into the spot that we just worked on. And that is our test spot right there. You can see the massive difference when it comes to swirls, scratches, marring. There we go, focused a little bit better. So this is the after. Bring you guys back into the before. That's the before right there. So I'm really, really happy with how our results turned out. So that is going to be the compound and the pad combination I'm going to use throughout the rest of the vehicle. So one thing to keep in mind when you are doing correction to a vehicle, and it's really going to be dependent on the type of vehicle that you're working with. You can see on this Corvette, we have a lot of body lines running through the hood. We have hard edges where the fenders meet the hood as well. Also the fender haunches all the way through. These are all areas that you have to keep in mind. When you're working your polisher throughout these areas, this is what you're going to need to do, all right? As we work through the section, that shoulder width section that I mentioned to you earlier, we hit this body line right over here. I don't want to just push my polisher over. We do still need to polish out that valley on that haunch right there. So what we need to do, we need to move our polisher sideways so we can get the edge of our pad rotating properly across this valley over here. So we can correct it and give it the same consistent finish that we see on our flatter portions as well. This takes time. It takes a little bit of skill and it takes practice. You're going to find it difficult in the beginning working through these valleys, these crevices and things of that nature. But as you start to learn the machine that you're using, get comfortable with it, and you build up confidence, you're able to tackle these areas. One thing to keep in mind, after you do a few section passes, so after I'm done with this pass through over here, I'm going to clean out my pad. And the reason why you want to clean out your pad after a few pass-throughs is because what we're doing during paint correction is we're removing material, we're removing clear coat, we're leveling that scratched and swirled up surface nice and flat so it looks nice and shiny when the light radiates back into our eyes, okay? But as we remove it, it gets clogged up in our pad and we start spreading that dead, nasty clear coat all over the painted finish, which is not going to give us the best results possible. This is super important if you want to reduce hazing and bring back clarity to a finish, all right? So after you do about 2 to 3 sections, right? So about half of this hood, I'm going to clean out my pad. I'll show you how to do that in the next section, all right? But right now, we're going to finish this section. Remember, consistent pass-throughs. But also do remember, if I notice something I want to chase after, I'll give it a little bit more pressure. I'll give it a couple more focused passes in that area. another key thing I'd like to mention when it comes to correcting your paint, and that is overlapping passes. Anytime I perform a pass with my pad, this is my pad with my polisher, all right? I am overlapping, and what do I mean by that? I take the center section of the pad and I essentially cut it in half. So if I'm doing a pass through this way, right? I see my center over here. I'll use my finger as my center point. Oh, sliding off the paint. Come at it this way. I'll use my finger as a center point, right? And as I finish that pass through, okay, I shift like that, about 50% of my pad. Do my pass through. There's my center point again, right over here. I shift only halfway through. And the same thing going back this way. Half, half, half. All right? What that ensures is that you are not missing any spots, okay? And plus, it gives you almost an extra pass-through, giving you a little bit more correction work, especially if you're chasing after defects, all right? Let me give you an exact example of how your pass-through should look. I got my pad, I'm gonna apply my compound, right? I got my dots of compound in there. I'm gonna go and spread that compound around. Whether you wanna dab it, whether you wanna rub it in, it doesn't matter, all right? I'm gonna start on my section, all right? My shoulder width and shoulder length section. And I'll go ahead and start polishing. Halfway through, overlapping pass. Halfway through, overlapping pass. Halfway through, overlapping pass. That is one complete pass through, okay? We need to do 6 of those, 6, where's my hand? 6 on average, okay? Back over here. Now I can go up and down with overlapping pass-throughs. That's 2. That's 3. And so on and so on, all right? You can see, if you do those overlapping pass-throughs, you're never gonna miss a spot, and it's gonna evenly be compounded out. All right, guys, just about done with compounding. We are just working the 3-inch and all the nooks and crannies. Alejandro's taking care of the front end, I'm taking care of the back end. But essentially we're grabbing our 3-inch polisher, going around all the little areas, all over here on the back bumper area. All right, guys, just finished compounding the Corvette, but I wanted to bring you guys into these pads real quick. So this is a clean pad, reasonably new, barely used. These are 2 used pads after around 5 sections. All right, look at that, look how dirty those look. Compare the 2. Reason being, this pad over here has a bunch of nasty old dead clear coat in it, which clogs up the fibers and the pores of the pad, whether it's microfiber, wool, or foam, decreases the amount of cut you get and decreases the finish as well. always recommend to switch out your pads on a regular basis. For example, we used about 6 of these mini 3-inch pads, and we used about 7 or 8 of the larger 6-inch pads that completed the rest of the car. So just to give you a brief overview on how many pads you most likely will need to get a really good finish. Now keep in mind, you might not need as much depending on size of vehicle, and you can also clean out your pads more regularly, but please do remember you are going to need a few of these to do a car correctly. All right guys, time for the final stage of the correction. So we went ahead into the heavy cut compound. We mowed down that dead, nasty, scratch up clear coat. Now it's time to refine the finish. Every time you do a heavy cut compound or use a heavy abrasive and a heavy pad, it essentially is going to leave a micro marring behind. What micro marring is essentially the marring from the heavy cut abrasive that's found in those types of compounds and also the heavier material of the pad. Well, now we have to finish that out. Essentially, we're refining the step that we just did. Some people might refer to as jeweling polish. Some people might refer to as finishing polish. This is your final stage of the correction, essentially. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and use a medium to light cut blue pad. We're going to use a finishing polish. And we're also going to make sure to have brand new soft microfiber towels dedicated for this stage of the paint correction. Reason being, the last thing you want to do, you listen up, Alejandro. Last thing you want to do is spend all your time compounding, polishing, getting the paint dialed in, and then you take a nasty old towel and scratch it all up again, all right? So we're going to avoid that. Brand new towel every time we do the finishing polish stage of our 2-step correction. So same thing as last time, guys. We're going to work a shoulder section, forward and back. About 4 pass-throughs this time. We won't need as many pass-throughs since we're not removing defects. We're just trying to finish out the paint that we had corrected from the heavy cut compound. All right, guys, went ahead and completed the full 2-step correction, and here are the results. I hope you can really notice the amount of shine and gloss we have now compared to before, and we haven't even ceramic coated it yet. I'm sure you noticed the gas cap, the hood, the pop-up headlights have been opened up. The reason why we did that is to go ahead and clean up all the residue from the compound and the polish on the edges. Make sure it's nice and clean before we do ceramic coat it. But as you can see, huge difference in gloss and shine. And I'll bring you up close and personal to the paint right now with a spotlight so you can see the before and afters on the swirl, scratch, and defect removal with the 2-step correction. So if you're interested in seeing us coat this classic C3 Corvette, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Comment below if you have any questions. And if you enjoy the video, hit that thumbs up. Really appreciate the support. It helps us out a lot. Catch you next time.